Hey guys, this is Cyphus. So today, the interview you're going to get to hear is one that I got to do last week with Lawliepop. You should know Lawliepop because of her work with a company called Elo Entertainment. Elo Entertainment is the company behind Dotabuff and Overbuff. If any of you, play Overwatch, I don't know why you would when you have Dota, but maybe you do, and that's okay. I see you guys talk about it in that channel in Discord. I know what you're doing. I know you're cheating on Dota. And you know what? I forgive you, and Lawliepop definitely forgives you. She was one of my favorite interviews by far. She has a lot of really interesting perspectives on women in gaming, running a business in esports, and she had a really overall positive, optimistic look ahead at Dota 2. And I feel like in the last couple of interviews that we've had, we've gotten into, and it's something I always like to ask content creators because it's a concern that everybody has if you are working in esports or attached to a video game. But she had a really optimistic outlook on the longevity of Dota, and tying that to some of the longevity around CS:GO and legacy games. And it was just a really fascinating interview. She's a really nice person. Obviously very intelligent, obviously very smart. I thoroughly enjoyed getting a chance to talk to her, and it was easily one of my more favorite interviews to have conducted. If you guys want to find her, and then you should go out and support her on Twitter. Let her know you heard this interview. Let her know that you appreciate her coming on .p. You can find her at Lawliepop on Twitter. That's LAWLIEPOP. And should be following Dotabuff at Dotabuff on Twitter, at Overbuff for those of you, like I said, cheating on Dota. But yeah, follow her on Twitter. Find Dotabuff at dotabuff.com, overbuff.com. Go support him. Grab a Dotabuff Plus. She'll tell you why. If you stick around for the entire interview, she'll explain to you why you should grab Dotabuff Plus. And I will admit I have had it. I had it way before this interview. This is not a shameless plug or a shameless ad. It's not an ad. I was even asked to do. I use Dotabuff Plus. Roland uses Dotabuff Plus. I suspect that he actually owns two Dotabuff Plus accounts because of you guys know all that quote unquote smurfing that he likes to go do. And I think he's got it. I'm on his computer right now. Let's take a look. Yeah, he's got it on his Smurf account. It's a great service. We really appreciate her coming on and taking the time to talk with us. If you guys want to find us, remember, defenseofthepatients.com. You can also find us on Twitter at .p_show. Go support the Patreon, patreon.com/defenseofthepatients. You guys have been amazing with your support there. Really, really appreciate that. You can also call us, leave a voicemail for those Tuesday Q&A questions, 888-410-7150. And remember, of course, just hit up the Discord, discord.gg/.p. That's how you interact with the community. You can chat with us and do all that great stuff. So without further ado, folks, here's the show. You are listening to a .p one-on-one. Pyrian Flax, welcome to the show, sir.
Hello.
That is Casey Atchison. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Sunfan.
Hello, friends. Been a long time.
Mott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me once again. Very excited to be here.
Austin, Capitalist Walsh. Welcome to the show, Cap.
Thank you very much, man. It's good to be back.
Special guest, Sir Action Slacks. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another .p one-on-one. As usual, I'm your host, Cyphus, and today I'm very happy because I get to talk to somebody who is a co-founder of Dotabuff, a service that I use all the time, even though it's not made me a better player in some respects. And I welcome Lawliepop to the show. Thanks for coming by and helping us out here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, I like I say, I do use Dotabuff all the time. It's my go-to, and I think it probably is for most Dota players at this point. I use it for everything. I've got the Dotabuff Plus. I've had that for several years.
Thank you.
I track all my terrible MMR rises and falls, and there are more falls than rises. Sometimes it feels like. But yeah, it's a great service. How did you get involved with Dotabuff? How did that come about?
So I'm one of the founders of the company behind Dotabuff, which is Elo Entertainment. And before we did Dotabuff, we actually did a League of Legends site, and we didn't like to talk about that
Yeah.
coming into Dota. But we did a League of Legends stat site that was kind of just behind a paywall, which is different than Dotabuff. That's meant to be useful whether or not you pay us money or not. We want everybody in the community to be able to use it and get something out of it. And we had that, and we had launched it, and at the time that we'd started working on that site, Dota was still in alpha and really inaccessible, and it was impossible to get keys for it. And then after we had launched it, Dota was actually accessible. It was the time in alpha where you could like spend, I think it was like $30 and get a key. And somebody who was in Dota approached us, and they were like, "Hey, I love what you guys are doing in League of Legends. I think you guys should do it in Dota." And they kind of had a method for gathering the data, because whenever we start doing stats for a game, there's never an API. We have to kind of figure out where does the data come from, and like stats have to find a way.
Just like
so
life, right? Life finds a way in some stats.
Yeah, so we teamed up, and we were way more excited about working in Dota over League of Legends for a number of reasons. But I would say the most obvious and universal one, it was that there was just so much more data available. In League of Legends, we were kind of like trying to squeeze water out of shit with the way that the data was available. Like League of Legends didn't have a way to find a match page. So like one of the ways that we added value in League of Legends is we would go to a player profile, see the last, I think it was 5 or 10 performances that was just what they did in the game. So like you played one hero, or champion in League of Legends, and then we would go and correlate that with all the other players in the game to actually build a match page. And that's ridiculous. So we were really excited about Dota, especially it had replays, the accessibility of replays, and we knew that we could get more and more data from that. And I think it's a better fit with the Dota community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you guys do any stats tracking with League still, or have you kind of left that behind?
Not anymore. Truthfully, after we launched Dotabuff, we thought we could sort of manage both doing League and Dota. And it was really difficult for us as a small team to keep focus. And we kind of ended up focusing a lot more on Dota because it was more exciting to work on. And then we kept our site for a few years, and it was actually still profitable. But eventually we were like, we just have subscriptions from people who forgot that they had subscriptions. Like that was the majority of the people who were paying us money. And we're like, we don't really want to run our business that way, and we know that we aren't really putting the effort that this site deserves, so we shut it down.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's all about quality of content, and you can, but obviously you guys adhere to that at Dotabuff. I mean, it's everything you could want and more. Oftentimes, I mean, you guys go above and beyond just the traditional API, or what the traditional API grabs, right? I mean, a lot of those are custom stats that you guys are putting together to glean additional information that maybe wouldn't be immediately accessible to somebody just staring at that raw API data.
Yeah, totally. We download a significant number of replays, and we it's actually in the history of Dotabuff interesting to see all the different places that we gather data from now, because we download replays, we parse replays. Kind of all the data that you can get from a replay is a little bit endless, and that you can like analyze and find out really, really detailed information about a match. But we also get a lot of data from the client and still the API, and we put it all together. And I kind of view that as the value that we add, is that we take data from a lot of different sources and then present it. And what we try to have is a cohesive way of understanding what happened in Dota.
Yeah. So for those that when you first meet somebody who has no idea, well, maybe even what Dota is, but certainly has no idea what Dotabuff does, how do you explain it to them? How do you describe that?
I usually say I do video game statistics, and then if they get excited and they're like, "Oh, what video game?" then I can say Dota, and they'll probably know either Dota or Overwatch, because we have an Overwatch site now, or League. Like, if they're a gamer who's at all interested in esports, they'll probably know one of those games.
Yeah.
And then I can talk about it more. But sometimes I'm like, I do video game statistics like on a website, and that's as far as it goes.
And as far as it needs to go for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So do you consider yourself a stats geek?
Uh, Not like a lot of other people in the community. Like, I think the Dota community is strangely obsessed with stats in a way that kind of doesn't make sense to me, which is good for my business, I guess. But to me, stats are a tool, and I'm really excited about the power of stats and the data visualization aspect of it. I'm not obsessed with stats for stats' sake, and I feel like some of the stats community in Dota is a little obsessed with stats for the stats sake.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's how we let people know how good we are. Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
that's very important. We need to be good at Dota. That's very important.
it's context for that, I guess.
Yeah. So before we delve further into Dota and Dotabuff, let's learn a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a suburb outside of Dallas,
Okay.
and I was super lucky to grow up during like I would call it what I would call as the first golden age of esports, when there was like CPLs and QuakeCons, and they were all in Dallas, and I was very lucky that it was just a car ride away. So I had lots of early exposure to all of that.
That's awesome. Do you still live in the Dallas area?
No. Right now I'm in Austin, but
Oh, okay.
I've lived a few, like all around Texas, and then I've also lived in Philadelphia and New York
Oh my God.
State.
So I lived just outside of Beaumont, Texas, for a very long time.
Oh, cool.
Most of my family, both my siblings, live down in Austin right now.
Awesome.
And we spent a brief amount of time living in a little suburb of Philadelphia right after that.
Small world,
Yeah,
then.
I actually I tell people all the time I miss Philadelphia a lot, just because of the history that was always in that city. Anywhere you go, there's a plaque or something describing some major historical American event. Just there's so much rich history there that you don't. Now we're based out of Salt Lake City, and you don't get that out here. you
Yeah,
know?
like the rich American history that you kind of only get in like Philly and DC and Boston.
Yeah. That's the one thing I miss the most. But we make do. I don't miss Texas, however. It's way too goddamn humid down there. I don't know how you do it. I don't know.
Well, it's not humid all over Texas. I just went to the desert for the weekend. It was not humid there, and it's not that humid in Austin, I think.
I don't know.
But-
I was down there in like July or August last year, and I know that's the worst time to judge Texas heat. I understand, but my God, it was. I'm used to. I like hot here is a very dry heat, and like there's zero moisture in the air here. So anytime there's any amount of humidity, I instantly feel like I'm gonna die, like I'm drinking the air.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Texas, but I can't do hot yoga. That's torture to me.
Yeah, I can't imagine there. So does Texas feel like home then? I mean, is that where that the place that you call home?
Kind of. I felt like when I was growing up, I wanted to get out of Texas because, like, you hear like a lot of negative things, and like there's kind of this tendency in the U.S. to be like thinking down on Texas a little bit. So I couldn't wait to get out. But then when I left, it made me appreciate Texas more because I enjoyed Philly. It was different. I enjoyed New York State. There were things that I liked about it, but I really missed, especially the diversity of Texas. Like I am half Mexican through ethnicity, even though I look really white. So being in a place that has a Hispanic population is actually like really important to me, I realized, to kind of feel at home. And then just generally like living someplace that has high diversity so that I can get access to a lot of food because I'm a foodie.
Yeah.
Is really, really
And Austin
important.
is great for that. I will admit.
It's good at fusion. Yeah.
I mean, some of the best cuisines from around the world are all available there in Austin. It's why my sister married a chef, and that's why they're in Austin. He's big on all types of food. He wants to be able to cook all types of food, and Austin's what does that for him. So
Awesome.
yeah, definitely.
I'm the same
good
way, but
flavor.
I'm a hobbyist. I want to learn to cook like every type of food.
So did you go to college?
I did go to college. I majored in computer science, and then I dropped out. So
So why did you drop out? Was it because you were heading into ELO Entertainment at the time, or did you just decide, screw
no,
it?
I'm actually really old. I'm 31, so it wasn't. I've been this.
I'm
company's
31
been
as well
around-
now. All right, let's not.
This company has been around for a little over 5 years.
Okay.
Before I was doing this, I was doing a financial services startup in Philadelphia, which was led by a professor at Wharton.
Mhm.
And it was a very, very similar to Dotabuff in the sense that you have a lot of really challenging ways of communicating data to an audience on a web page. But it was not like Dotabuff in the sense that like you're making a website for old people to use. And also before that, I led a top US World of Warcraft guild for like 4 or 5 years.
Oh wow. What was the guild?
Blood Legion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know I've heard Blood Legion before. I for sure. That's awesome. So, you were like active leadership, or like did you co-found it? What was your involvement with them?
So for the majority of the time that I was in the guild, we had three leaders, and I was one of the 3 leaders, and it was like a council situation. I did all of the recruitment, like at times, because there were 3 of us, and sometimes we got lazy. It was like I was doing everything for periods of time, but we kind of rotated that role, I guess. So yeah, but I think I didn't address your initial point, which is why I dropped out of school.
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of more for personal reasons, because this is getting a little dark. Sorry,
That's
but
all right.
I had an abusive family growing up, and then when I attended college, I mistakenly, instead of focusing on getting as far away from home as possible, I went to the best college for the major that I had happened to get into, and my family started like to continue to like show up on campus and stuff, and it actually made me feel really unsafe, and that's part of why I dropped out. Sorry if that's super dark.
No, that's fine. People drop out for a lot of different reasons, and that is maybe one of the most understandable reasons to drop out I've ever heard. I mean, I totally understand. I think it's awesome that you're willing to share it. So when did you get into gaming?
I honestly don't know, because it's like literally since I could press buttons, I was on a computer, and we had an early computer in my house, and it had like those like big floppy disks.
Oh yeah.
And we just had like tons of the games. I didn't grow up with consoles. My parents wouldn't buy consoles. But I always had an access to a PC. So eventually at some point I discovered like multiplayer online video games, and then there was no going back. Like I'm the type of gamer that I don't play every game. I play a few, like 1 or 2 games at a time, and really, really focus on them. And it tends to be multiplayer games.
Mm-hmm.
I can't play single player games. I'll try to skip through every cinematic. I won't read any of the lore. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm just a competitive adversarial gamer, I guess.
I think that makes sense, especially when you start. I haven't played much Overwatch since the beta. Because I'm obviously we do a Dota 2 podcast. I'm hooked. That's my dark mistress is the Dota. But the lore is always absurd. I remember seeing the lore for Overwatch, and I was like, I don't need you to justify why there's a giant monkey. I got it.
Yeah. I think Overwatch's cinematics are like adorable and endearing, and I actually watch those because there aren't very many of them, and they come out like every few months.
Yeah,
and it's not too much. But like me, I don't know, like playing a Final Fantasy game, that's just not. That's like the opposite of the type of gamer that I am. Nothing against people who do like all the cutscenes and cinematics and like turn-based stuff, but I just don't have the patience for it.
Yeah. No, I can understand that completely, and especially with online multiplayer games, with competitive games, sometimes the lore just bogs it down. Like when we first started the show, we were trying to go through all of the various like hero backgrounds in Dota, and I remember reading that like Shadow Shaman used to perform circumcisions, and I thought, why? One, can I please meet the guy who wrote Shadow Shaman's background? Because I definitely want to know that. I definitely, whoever that individual is, he or she, that's who I want an interview with. I want to know why Shadow Shaman had to do and go from town to town performing circumcisions. That's what I want to know. So lore's absurd. It may almost make the game a little bit worse to know some of the lore behind some of the
Yeah.
heroes.
Like, I don't know, whenever we have this community like pay for a comic things, like I don't even read them. It's just sometimes the heroes say cute things, and that's enough lore for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I much prefer just hearing their random interactions in the game. That's enough. That does it for me. So what do you play besides Dota 2?
So I mainly play Dota 2 and Overwatch, but in the last month I've kind of started playing CS:GO, which is a little unexpected for my personality, but like I've kind of taken a liking to it. I mean, it's still pretty new.
You're not normally a shooter player?
I used to play a lot of shooters. Like I always say I like to use romantic language when I talk about games because I tend to play like one game for like 5 or 6 years. But one of the games that I fell in love with from like 1999 to 2005 was Quake 3.
Oh yeah.
And I consider that like the biggest arcade shooter. But like at that time, Quake 3 and Counter-Strike were kind of rival games. Like it was like Dota and LoL. So now to go and play CS:GO, I feel like a little bit of betrayal to my Quake roots.
Well, it's all right. I'm sure they'll forgive you. Do you own any colorful knives yet in CS:GO?
No, I want them now.
Oh no!
Like I literally, I watched some CS:GO while I was having lunch today, and I want some of those knives. I will sell some of my Dota gear to get a CS:GO knife. That's where the cosmetics are for me.
So I'll say that the first esport that I was ever interested in watching was Dota for sure. I think maybe I could count on one hand the number of StarCraft matches I saw, and to me it was always like, yep, fun, great. But CS:GO, do you watch CS:GO pro matches at all, or is that anything you're interested in?
I've just started a little bit, and because I've only been playing CS:GO for like a month, but I love the spectating tools that they have. It's so, like, I don't think it's actually progressed that much over the last 10 years, but it's still so good compared to like other FPSs like Overwatch, where they don't have good spectating at all.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've yet to see any competitive Overwatch be played, but that's the common complaint I hear from folks. I had a buddy who went down to the last BlizzCon, and he said basically everybody was, when the Overwatch was going on, everybody kind of popped in for 5 or 10 minutes and then decided they were going to go watch a StarCraft match instead.
Really, that's interesting. Like the Overwatch area of BlizzCon had like a wait outside, like a line.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole time.
Huh, wow.
It was awesome. But StarCraft always had space, so
yeah. Okay.
And I enjoy watching StarCraft.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. I should have had you talk to Roland about StarCraft. That's his arena.
I'm not actually intelligent on it. It's just my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Like it's probably one of my favorite esports to watch. Because now when I'm watching Dota, it feels a little bit like work. Like I can't sit back and enjoy the game. I'm always thinking about work when I'm watching Dota.
Yeah. So
StarCraft to me is actually relaxing to watch.
No, that totally makes sense. When did you get into Dota 2?
So I've been working in Dota 2 for about 5 years. I played the original Dota back as early as like 2004. I never took it seriously. It was always sort of a game that I goofed around and played all random in with the friends that I had at the time, sort of like as a side game. Mm-hmm. That was like our side hustle while we were playing other games. And then I also like played Han and stuff. And truthfully, when I came to Dota 2, some of like the Han heroes and the original Dota heroes felt like they blurred together. Like I could remember a hero, but I couldn't remember if it was Han or Dota. So yeah, like I've been in Dota a very, very long time.
So when you do play, do you have a preferred role that you like to play?
Honestly, it really depends on how confident I feel about my game, because I can sometimes go for like a month without playing Dota and then I'll be like, oh, I'll just support. Because for whatever reason, support feels like less pressure to me. But if I'm actually like feeling confident and good, then I love to play a core of some kind. And I don't have a specific role. I just have like a small like subset of heroes that I like to play. And then they seem to find a new favorite every 6 weeks and then get obsessed with them.
So who are your current favorites?
Death Prophet, Earthshaker, I seem to always do Witch Doctor and Dazzle though when I like don't know what to play. Those are like my go-to historical favorites.
Well, at least you're willing to play a support. I mean, it doesn't happen often. This is, I understand it's impolite to ask a lady her MMR, but
I don't play ranked.
Oh, not at all?
No, well, I haven't much. I think when we had a snapshot, this is like 4 years ago, we had a snapshot of MMRs and like hidden MMRs and could estimate better their MMR. I think I thought I was like 3K then, but I know I'm like 5 times worse than I was 3 years ago. So I would say I'm like 500 MMR. Just consider it to be not good. When I started playing Dota 2, it was like the first. I didn't have a honeymoon phase with it. I was immediately working in Dota 2, right. And that was really depressing for me to not have a honeymoon phase where I could like sit back and enjoy the game and get good at it. So like Dota 2 is the first game that I've played where my focus hasn't been being good at the game, and I'm an extremely competitive person who likes to be good at every game that I play. So it was really, really depressing for a few years, but I'm kind of over it now.
Yeah. Do you get to play often?
Somewhat. Like I would say if I play more than 5 games in a week, that's a good week for me. But I will have days at work where I will start the day by playing 1 or 2 games of Dota, just to kind of like think about a work problem passively or something while I'm playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I do kind of the same thing. Of late, I've been most of my games just because I still work a day job, and then we are usually doing something for the podcast at night, and recording or having some sort of meeting, and then so I've had to start waking up in the mornings early if I want to get any amount of Dota in. It turns out, but I like playing those morning games. Sometimes
I do too.
I do so. All right, so somebody can actually talk about with this. So sometimes in the morning, I feel like I get one of 2 crowds. I either get like-minded people, other working professionals like me that are up a little early. They're going to kick their day off, get their brain kind of working, because I'll definitely say that it gets my mind active when I get into that game. By 5 minutes into that game, my mind's running. I feel like I'm thinking sharp, and I feel like I'm playing maybe my best Dota. So I'll get some of those people. But I also feel like I get like hangover people who have been going all night
Yes, I actually love that. I feel like I looked at my Dotabuff because we have activity feed where you can see like by the hour, and it's like the earlier on like a Monday morning is when I play the best, because if I actually woke up early enough, like 8 a.m., 7 a.m. and played Dota, I was awake, and all the people who like played overnight who were like burning out and ready to like lose MMR, they're still playing, and I'm like fresh.
Yeah, I equate those. I used to play a lot of poker, and they all that other end of the spectrum, that half that's been up all night. They always reminded me of the like hardcore gamblers who were there on like a 14-hour run sitting at the table, who were just bleeding money and felt like if they stayed at the table, they'd hit a good run of luck somewhere. And they're all some of them are funny, because they're delirious because they've been going all night, or they're drunk or whatever, some kind of inebriated. Mm-hmm. Or they're just terrible, miserable people. that yes. Seems to be the other element that's awake at 7 a.m. playing Dota.
Yes, terrible, miserable people. Sometimes Australians.
Yeah, sometimes. So what are some? Let's get back to Dotabuff. What have been some of your most frustrating challenges along the way with Dotabuff?
I would say it's hard when Valve changes a lot of things, and I would say a not insignificant portion of our time is just reacting to things that Valve changes or things that changes with the game. And it's not like normal patches, like a normal patch where it's like we added a new hero and we like changed some stuff. Like we're pretty good at reacting to that. It's things where like they completely change things. Like 7.0 is a big deal for us because they changed fundamental game rules that we had built assumptions around on the site. And
what were some of those, just out of curiosity, that like really impacted you guys?
So like ability builds, like the way that you do skill builds, because they took away stats. Like we had all these systems for tracking the statistics on that had assumptions that like, oh, like you can only skill these ability builds at certain levels, and then after that you get stats. And we just had to completely redo all of those systems. And from a business perspective, like we will never run out of things to do. Like Dota has a game that has so much depth. There's so many things that we can do with stats. For us, it's about like finding the right thing to focus on that is going to have the biggest impact and reach the widest audience and like be most valuable to the community. And redoing ability builds was like not at the top of the list of things that that was like super important for the community. But then like it felt like we needed to do it because it was just completely outdated, and enough heroes had some fundamental reworks like over time that it's like, yeah, that's super outdated.
Yeah. What are are those the same kinds of challenges that you guys have moving forward? Are there other new issues that have started to present themselves as you guys have gotten along?
I would say, like, for me personally, one of the hardest things about the job is that we add new statistics or we add new, like, cool features on the site. And the site is so big at this point. It has so much depth that, like, making sure that people see the new feature and then also that you aren't just, like, bloating up a web page. Because, like, adding another statistic to a web page is not always a plus. So... And then if we take anything away, like people are really unhappy because, you know, you'll have like the 2% of people who actually cared about that feature who really, really are going to miss it. So I think that's one of the big challenges that we have is doing cool new features that people are actually going to be able to use, that's going to be impactful, and that's not going to like bloat up the web page or the web navigation too much.
Right. So, you know, one of the things I realize you guys are in kind of a different vein from most of the types of content creators that we've had on this show before, but you know, one of the hardest things for a lot of content creators is kind of just keeping at it. Have you ever felt like quitting along the way? I mean, have you ever just kind of reached your wit's end and said, I want to be done?
I don't think that I've had a big burnout or anything, but I do think it's totally normal for everybody to sometimes think about quitting their job, right? Like,
Sure.
Don't you ever have those days where you're like, I just want to go on vacation and quit? Like I in 2016, I didn't take a single vacation, and I realized that when 2017 hit, and I was like, damn, I should take a vacation because I work really hard. Like I consistently work through the weekends. Like a light week for me is I do 48 hours on like the weekdays, and then I'll work half days on Saturday and Sunday because I'll just like wake up and be like, oh, I've got to keep doing this. So part of the challenge is that I know like a lot of other content creators are like, oh, I'll never run out of work, but I'll never run out of work. Plus I'm running a business. So if I don't do my work, then my employees don't have work to do. Right. And then there's also the pressure of like, you're providing an income to somebody. You have to make sure that you're actually going to keep providing them a job. Like you can't, if you slack off, you won't be able to pay this person. Right. So all of that is an incredible amount of pressure. Like I constantly wake up in the middle of the night, anxious, thinking about some like random new feature that I want to get out and like what is stopping us and like all of that. It's not for everyone. Yeah, I'll say that.
So, kind of in that vein, I mean, do you ever worry about Dota dying? I mean, you know, we all kind of saw StarCraft. I know that it's still going, but that competitive scene is certainly not what it once was. You know, it's not in its heyday by any means. You know, Dota's still, but you know, by all at least estimations, you know, player counts have gone up from year to year. The prize pools for the internationals have gone up from year to year. But there's always that risk that it takes that downward spiral, right? Is that something that you worry about in the back of your mind while doing things with Dotabuff?
I do worry about it, and I think at Dotabuff we try to support the community and try to encourage a healthy community. At the same time, like that's like it's somewhat in my control, but it's mostly out of my control, right? So I try to only stress over things that are in my control and be aware of it. I think that there's an opportunity with Dota because it's a game that's been around so long. And if you compare it to like Counter-Strike, they had 1.6, they had a big hump. And then now CSGO is doing better than ever, which if you told me that like, 5-7 years ago, I've been like, what are you talking about? But that's kind of the dream that game developers have is to like have this legacy game. And I think the closest parallel to what CSGO has done is Dota, because Dota, the original Dota, Defense of the Ancients, was incredibly popular. Dota 2 is incredibly popular. And even if as a community we've maxed out and we're basically going to be stagnant for a little while, there's still opportunities for long-term innovation that can keep the game from, like completely dying out.
Yeah. I mean, and, you guys obviously are branching over into Overwatch, as, we kind of mentioned earlier. With Overbuff, I mean, you guys feel like your content's pretty well poised to move on from Dota to other things if you ever absolutely had to, right?
Yes, but we're very picky. Like if I compare our company to a lot of other, I guess you could say community sites, like a ZAM who does like Wowhead, and a lot of other sites, or like Curse, like they tend to like do sites for every game. And like I remember I was talking to the president of ZAM at the BlizzCon where Overwatch was announced. I talked to him the day after, and he's like, "We already have an Overwatch site." And I was like, "Okay." And I went to it, and they had literally just copy paste the Blizzard Overwatch site. It was just like just the heroes and like a paragraph about them. I was like, wow. I mean, I guess you can try to get in early to get like better SEO, but for us as a company, whenever we really look at the community sites that we enjoy, it always comes from a place of like passion for the game. Like it's always started, like maybe like a Cursor Zam bought that company, but it started from people who were really passionate about the game and wanted to improve the community.
Yeah.
So we're very much about going deep and not going wide. Like you won't see us with like tons of game sites ever. We want to have just a few game sites and do them very well.
Yeah, for sure. So do you feel like creating content and, and monitoring stats, obviously you guys, I hate to call it creating content because your stats feels like such a different beast than.
Yeah, but I consider us a content creator. Like we create like dynamic automated content, right?
Right.
So like something like a player profile on Dotabuff, that's definitely community content. And we have to make sure that the design of it works for a player who's played 10 games or like several thousand games. And I think that's the fun. That's the challenge of what we're doing.
Do you feel like your work at Dotabuff has made you a better Dota player?
No. I think that I always joke that we learn the most useless bits of information. Like when we were digging through the replay, things like, is it a stun or is it a bash? Like things that have no impact on your ability to play Dota, but it's just like, oh, that's interesting kind of trivia stuff, like how some of like the unit orders and work and stuff like that. Like it doesn't help you. It's just like bogging down your mind because the next time you play Dota, you're going to think about stupid.
Didn't stun that
stuns.
guy. I bashed that guy.
Yeah, and then it's like also inconsistently programmed in Dota. So that's useless things that I know about Dota.
So what are some of your favorite Dotabuff features that you guys have?
I really like our hero guides. Like I know I'm supposed to plug Plus here, and maybe I will, but like if you've ever like played Dota and random a hero that you hadn't played in a while, or like a new hero gets released and you're like, how are people playing them? You can go to like the hero profile and then guides, and it will just give you various high MMR games in the last like 48 hours.
Yeah.
So, like if you ever random a hero and you're like, shit, this hero changed in the last patch and I don't remember exactly what happened and a bunch of items that they used changed, and you just want to like get a sense of how high MMR players have been playing them. I think it's a really, really fun feature.
Oh, I'm very familiar with that feature. And I'll tell you, my favorite way to use it is Roland, one of the co-founders here at DotP. He's quit his job. He's not doing it. He's focusing on all this full time. So he gets to do the fun stuff like stream at 11 o'clock in the morning while I'm sitting at my job writing up a new contract. And so I'll pop on to the stream on my phone periodically, and I'll watch him playing a game. And my favorite thing to do is to go to that guide and then just criticize his build incessantly in the Twitch chat. So yeah, I'm very aware of that feature. Put it to good use.
And then I also really like, and you kind of have to go deep to get this, but on a match page that has been replay parsed, the combat tab.
Oh yeah.
because it shows like every single like ult that you did and who it hit, and like if you have skill shots you can see like, oh, I did like 10 Marana arrows and all of them missed.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a horrible person. But you can also like how much healing you did, or like the really interesting thing I learned from that is that people don't right click that much in Dota. Like you would think over the course of like an hour-long game that you would have hundreds of hits on other heroes, and most people don't.
Yeah,
it's like 50 to like 150, maybe more if you're the carry. But yeah,
I think the most fascinating stat to read there, because I think it's changed the way, you know, and I'll even credit you guys with a lot of this. I think it's changed the way people think about certain items at times when it comes to damage and damage block. Because I don't think until I started looking at the combat tab in a match after a match rather, I didn't realize how much magic damage I was taking, for instance. You know what I mean? Like how frequently I was dying to maybe one type over the other, based off of a lineup. You know, and having that as just kind of a reference point for, you know, maybe I should build that pipe more often. That's the kind of damage I'm taking all the damn time. That's what's killing me. That's what's doing it.
Yeah, totally. It's like the thing that you think you're considering, and then after the match, you're like, "Oh, right, they were all physical. I should have thought about armor or something."
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's I'm with you there. That combat tab is awesome. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because I know you're involved with the Deso ladies. How did you come to get involved with them?
I joined whenever they had their announcement, basically. It was a few months ago. Yeah, and I've been a member in there. Sometimes I'm not super active, but I really like kind of what the group aspires to do, which is just be a place for women in Dota.
Yeah, I mean, so for our female listeners out there, how do they go about getting involved with Deso ladies?
So I would check out Desoladies Twitter. They have a link, I think, in their Twitter description. It's just Desoladies, like the item, but with ladies. And you can sign up to join, and it's primarily a Discord with just a lot of women who like to play Dota, which is really nice if you just haven't had the opportunity to play with a lot of women or want to talk about that, or they actually have a really great streaming community.
Yeah, that's
that
awesome.
Has a lot of women who stream.
Yeah, it's odd to me the kinds of issues, you know, and I only have my you know, charmed white male perspective, because I've never been in a game and I've never had somebody insta judge me based off of, now I've had them insta judge me because I locked a hero they didn't like, maybe last pick,
Right.
But but that's perhaps a legitimate critique of how I might perform, you know, moving forward in the game. I've never had someone insta judge me just because they heard me talk on mic, or because they thought that my screen name indicated that I was a woman. And I you know, I've talked about it several times on the show, but I'm going to say it again. But my girlfriend Rin, she started getting into Dota with me about 6 months ago, I'll say. And within 2 months of playing pub matches, she's just decided to turn off the mic. She doesn't use the mic. She doesn't interact with anybody. She doesn't want them to know that she's a woman, because she just, within those 2 months, her interaction with the general public of the Dota community was that level of toxic. I mean, have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use my mic in Dota. I use it in Overwatch, and I sometimes use it in CSGO, but I don't in Dota. I don't know why. It's just more intimidating. I think that in comparison, CSGO's community has more mic usage because there's downtime where it's like low pressure. So there's the opportunity to socialize and more people talk on mic. Whereas with Dota, you're like on immediately and you can't stop focusing on the game unless you died, and then you don't want to fucking talk then. Sorry. Yeah. You don't want to talk then, right?
Yeah. You can say
so
fuck here, by the way. We're explicit. We got the magic cool. E.
Nice. So yeah, like I don't, and I've had people just be like, "Oh, you have a vagina. That's the problem," and it's it's discouraging. I've heard so many horror stories from women about how I'm friends with a woman who casts, and she said, "Yeah, casting's bad, but it's not as bad as ranked," which I'm like, okay.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's an
Oh.
experience that you have.
Is it that
Yeah.
different in Overwatch and CS:GO? I mean, do you interact with that on on less of a basis? Do you feel like?
In Overwatch, I encounter a lot more women. Like I've had games in Overwatch where 3 women have just ordered around all the other people on the team as to what to do, and it's felt amazing. I didn't know that I would ever experience that in my lifetime, where just like all these women are bossing around the men or unknown gendered people on the team. And then I have heard other women in CS:GO, and it's been. I feel like CS:GO is like higher highs and lower lows because there's something endearing about their community and that they have all this downtime and talk on mic, and you hear lots of joking around and lots of really, really unfriendly things as well.
Do you feel like the Dota community needs more outlets like Deso Ladies for women?
I think it needs. So I feel conflicted on this because one of my inspirations for being more involved and like women in Dota and esports is that like I'm trying to take a space that I already have a role in and try to make it more friendly towards people, both for like the long-term health of esports and Dota and all of that. But when you look at like tech, I used to think that in the tech industry that talking about women and talking about the problems that women face in tech was like a good thing. Like just having the conversation is making an impact. And then in the last like year or two, I've seen all the tech companies who have been trying to increase their diversity have actually been losing women at a higher rate. So there's a complicated balance between trying to make a space more welcoming to women or gender marginalized or like minorities of any sort in a space, but also kind of like understanding that it's not about attracting the people, it's about retaining the people and making sure that long term it's going to be a friendly place and that people don't get burnt out.
Yeah, for sure.
I consistently hear people say things like, oh, well, women aren't interested in playing at the highest level, so that's why they don't do it. And if you compare that to professional studies, it's actually really common for women when they start a job to be just as ambitious about it as men are. But then if they encounter harassment and discrimination, it actually just like crushes their soul and they become less ambitious over time, like 1 year later, 5 years later. It's really interesting. And I suspect the same thing is happening in esports.
Yeah, because you frequently see things like I heard one of so I studied psychology in college.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm obsessed with behavior, and I like looking at things, like how men and women are wired differently, as far as literally in their brains. Like women are wired more front to back, whereas men are more left to right, or I might have that reversed. But basically meaning that women are capable of more and capable of better analytical and empathetic thinking, typically. As opposed to men who are wired more for motor reflexes. Like literally, we don't have great thinking abilities, but we have some good motor reflexes because of how our brains are naturally wired. And one of the studies that I always heard thrown around as kind of an argument for why there weren't as many women in esports is that women learn complex skills slower than men. And while that might be true, that might be a true analysis of the current situation, it always fails to take into consideration that there might be a root cause for why that is the case. That, just like you're talking about, like you can come into it with just as much ambition, but as soon as you're discouraged, as soon as you are met with a higher level of resistance than your male counterparts, if you're discouraging that ambition, if you're discouraging that desire to do that, and I think it frequently happens in society with women to begin with, then you're screwed. Then you're not going to. Then that's how we get there, and I always feel like we fail to analyze the root cause of why that occurs.
Absolutely, and it's really complicated because like obviously like you can look at like overt sexism, like if somebody says like, oh, you have a vagina, that's why you're bad at Dota, like I can look at that and know that's ridiculous, right? That person's just being sexist. But when you have more subtle sexism, like people are more likely to criticize your play if they know you're a woman or they expect you to do poorly in a game because you're a woman, and you continually get feedback about that, it changes the way that you think of yourself as a player. And again, to go back to like the tech industry or business, that's a well-studied and documented thing in professional spheres. Like women consistently get what's called gendered feedback. Like, oh, you're being too assertive, and simultaneously you aren't talking enough. Like that's something that's given to women in a professional setting.
Yeah. And what do you do?
Yeah. And like when you hear that over and over again, over the course of years, you start to be like, well, maybe I really am too assertive. And maybe because it's not overt sexism. It's not obvious that it's tied to your gender, and you start to internalize it.
Yeah.
And then I think if you focus too much on things being gendered, then you sort of like create a victim complex for yourself. So it's like it's really complicated to navigate feedback and being a woman in a male-dominated space, I think.
So do you feel like the Dota community, or I mean, we can even kind of broaden this to esports in general, do you feel like they're moving in a positive direction with regards to gender equality? Do you think we'll start to see more, pro Dota players that are female, or more pro, just generally esports players that are female?
And at a very high level, yes, I'm very optimistic that it's going to improve. But I think it's important to note that like progress usually in that area usually isn't linear. There will be setbacks. And there will be regressions. But I generally think that yes, that's the path that we're heading, is to have more diversity and more representation.
Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between the Dota 2 pub mentality concerning women in gaming versus like the more pro-centric level of the community?
I think that they're both pretty similar in the sense that so I think first of all, Dota attracts kind of like an intellectual superiority. I like to say that Dota attracts the person who likes to think that they're the smartest person in the room. Because when you compare it to other games, it's kind of old school in the sense that like it makes you work for things. And it also has like very high highs and very low lows, because we've all had a terrible game before where their carry got fed and we felt useless. But then we've all had the game where we were the fed carry and we felt like a god. So, and also I think the difficulty of Dota is in so much of the complexity and the research and the counterplay that you need to understand to be really good at it. So it's very like intellectual and strategy focused game compared to others where it's like not the hardest mechanical game in the world compared to like an FPS. So I think it really attracts the type of person who values intelligence, and Dota players do feel superior to a lot of other gamers in some capacity, like sometimes obnoxiously. Like, I'm sorry if that's an unpopular opinion.
No, you're 100% right, and it's one of the in your description of the person who likes to think they're the smartest person in the room. I'm ashamed to admit that I know that I have that impulse sometimes whenever I'm especially when I'm playing Dota. I know that that's an element of my personality that drew me to this game and it incited that hardcore love that I have for it. And I can look at a lot of the people that I personally associate with that were big fans of Dota, that became big fans of Dota, and kind of see that element of them. And you're right. I wish I knew how to overcome it. And I think, I guess the only way you can is by trying to recognize it and kill that arrogance, when it comes up, it comes into play. But and even just in the online community, though, you can see that superiority complex that Dota players have, especially, when comparing themselves to League.
Yeah, totally. And pro players in every game kind of have a superiority complex because they're really good at this game, right? But Dota players sort of have additional baggage on top of that because they're the best at such an intellectual game.
Right. Yeah. We're terrible people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think the way that I feel about it all, about like the welcomingness of the community and all the diversity things, is that I feel like personally, you either educate yourself and learn more about more people, or you kind of become the racist uncle when you get older in life if you aren't learning new things.
Right.
Because like I feel like younger generations will progress and accept things. Like if you just look at like gay people, like, teenagers today, homophobia is at a huge all-time low for them. And, you look at somebody who's like my dad's age in his 60s or 70s, he doesn't even understand what a trans person is. Like that wasn't something that he grew up with exposure to. So.
Yeah. And hopefully the Dota community is around long enough to experience those types of those types of learning moments. You know, I feel like we had one just recently. I brought it up a couple times on the show, but like with that Axe cast. I don't know if you're familiar with the
Yeah, I am.
the Cyclops cast that with Axe. You know, I felt like that was. I hope that was a learning moment. You know what I mean? I hope that those types of things are learning moments and that we're moving forward in a good direction. But,
Totally. I think it also needs to be a learning moment because like a lot of women in the industry have, like internalized sexism against women, right? As weird as that sounds, but like I'm a girl in gaming and I grew up hearing tons of boys be like, "Oh, you're so different from all the other girls. You're so much better than all the other girls." And then simultaneously, when you're in such a male-dominated space, everybody compared me to the other women. So then you naturally compare yourself to the other women. It's like it's a nasty cycle that has kind of like led to like when I meet a woman in gaming, I feel like there's a really high percentage that they just hate other women and will never be friends because of that.
do you feel like Desa ladies and those types of communities are a good step in that direction, though?
Absolutely. And I think like more and more women are identifying that. Like maybe like 10 years ago, I was a huge asshole. Like I would talk down and look down at other women in gaming because I had internalized that gamer culture of like, like women who stream are just doing it for attention, stuff like that. And it took me becoming a lot more mature and gaining more experience in more gaming communities to just like realize like, wow, I'm a huge asshole.
Yeah.
Like women are allowed to play games. Like, what am I doing?
Well, let's steer back over to Dotabuff before we close the show out, and I want to ask you what's on the horizon for Dotabuff and ELO Entertainment.
So I'm really excited about the next big feature that we're launching. I think it's going to come out in like 2 or 3 weeks. I don't want to say what it is, but I'll say it's stats for something that we've never done stats for before.
Okay. All right. I mean, I've
been having a lot of fun with it.
I think as a journalist, I'm supposed to press you for it. And I use the term journalist very loosely, but no, I won't. I'm just kidding. Well, that's exciting to hear. So in like 2 or 3 weeks, another new awesome stat coming our way from Dotabuff.
Yes,
that's good to look forward to. Let's see. Okay, before you go, here's the question that I always go to Roland. I'm like, are there any good questions I should ask before I do this interview? And his question, he said, the only question I should ask you, it would have been a very short interview if I had, is why should I get Dotabuff?
I think, so there's a million reasons why I think you should get Dotabuff Plus and why you should use Dotabuff. Like, first of all, I think that there's a lot of things that we can learn from our games that we aren't consciously thinking about. Like, I used to play Caudle and I thought I was amazing on him. And I would just like get like kills on people in lane, and then I looked at my Dotabuff and my win rate was like 30% or something. Like after a significant number of games, like 20 games, I was like, what am I doing with my life? But I think that there's a lot that you can learn from your personal stats, things that we talked about, like the combat tab, where like you're getting more detailed information. Like you'd be surprised how often, even at relatively high MMRs, people buy items and use it like once. And they are thinking about like, why did I buy this item? Why am I not ulting more often? If you have like a 2-hour game and you only ult once, like maybe you should hit that ult button more often. Things like that where we can be self-reflective. I think it lets you get lost in the complexity of Dota a little bit. And also you're supporting people who are contributing to the community, which I greatly appreciate. If you're supporting Dotabuff, we really, really owe everything to the people who actually purchase Plus, because we wouldn't be able to do what we do if we didn't have that. We would be a non-company if we were just trying to get off of web advertisements alone.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys heard it here. Go get Dotabuff Plus. God damn it, because you can do so much more. The feature that I think I've enjoyed the most having the Dotabuff Plus for was the matchups, being able to see like what in particular like my player teammates that I frequently play with, and seeing how well we do together over a long period of time. And knowing that old Roland was dragging me down,
Yeah, I have some friends like that. They They just don't take it seriously when you play in a group. I hate it.
Yeah, he's that way. That's him to a T. The moment he's doing this big try hard thing where he's just every time he plays solo ranked, he is trying his damnedest. He's doing everything right. He's not diving towers. He's not doing crazy bullshit. And then when he plays party ranked with me, it's all random all the time, baby. Every chance he gets.
That's awful.
Oh, at least he's out of his jungle phase. That's another story. So if folks want to find you, they can follow you on Twitter at Lawliepop. That's LAWLIEPOP. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been it's been great to get to know you. It's been great to learn more about Dotabuff and how you guys got started. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And if you guys want to find Dotabuff, go to Dotabuff.com. Go check them out. Overbuff.com. If any of you out there are sullying your good Dota times with some Overwatch play, I'll forgive you. Go check out Overbuff.com. And you can follow Dotabuff at Dotabuff on Twitter and Overbuff at Overbuff on Twitter. So go check all those things out. Go let them know that you heard about it here and that you're going to go get Dotabuff Plus because you want to support the community. If you guys want to find us, we're defenseofthepatients.com. Tweet at us at .p_show. Email us at defenseofthepatients@gmail.com. Send in those Tuesday Q&A questions. Leave us a voicemail, 888-410-7150. Of course, patreon.com/defenseofthepatients. We're at like 700 something out of the 1,000 on the goal there. We got a lot of really good feedback on the last Patreon episode about the $1,000 goal. We may have even announced it by the time you guys hear this interview, but I'm in the past, so I don't know it yet. All right, I think that's going to be it. You guys know where to find us. Well, they're the good stuff. So until next time, this is Cyphus for Lawliepop saying good luck and Godspeed.